The human pilot named Hale never planned to wander so far from the safe routes. He had been carrying relief supplies between border stations when a sudden solar storm tore through the region, shaking his small ship like a toy in the fists of an angry god. Alarms screamed, lights flickered, and every chart he relied on became useless noise. But even in that chaos, he noticed something strange, an emergency beacon pulsing weakly from a nearby nebula. Most pilots would have ignored it. The nebula was known for shredding sensors and swallowing ships whole. Yet something inside him whispered that someone needed help, had never been good at walking away from a cry for help. So he turned toward the dangerous cloud of blue fire. The closer he flew, the more the nebula writhed. It flashed with stormlight like giant shadows fighting among the vapors, steadied his shaking breath as he pushed his ship into the glowing haze. His sensors were blind, so he followed the beacon's rhythm with the patience of a man listening for a heartbeat in the dark. And then, he saw it. A massive golden vessel lay half-broken among drifting shards of metal. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall, elegant, and shaped like two sweeping wings folded protectively around a central core. Even in ruin, it looked noble. Guided his ship toward it and found a breach large enough to enter. Inside, silence ruled, broken only by the faint pulse of failing power. Strange symbols glimmered across the walls, smooth, curved writing filled with soft amber light. He followed them through the wreck until he reached a chamber whose doors had jammed halfway open. With a grunt, he forced them apart. And there, lying on the cold floor, was someone he had never expected. She was tall, slender, and covered in shimmering silver skin that reflected the dim lights like moonlit water. Her crown-like crest rose delicately from her head, shaped almost like flower petals made of light. She looked powerful even while unconscious, and around her lay the bodies of guards who had died protecting her. Did not know who she was, but he knew she mattered. He knelt beside her and checked for a pulse. A soft, warm beat touched his fingertips. She was alive, but barely. Her breathing was shallow, and a deep burn across her side told him she had been hurt when the ship broke apart. "Hey," he whispered instinctively, though she could not hear him. "You're not dying today, not while I'm here." He lifted her carefully, surprised by how light she felt despite her height. Her skin radiated a gentle warmth, like standing near a campfire on a cold night. He carried her back through the corridors, stepping over debris and fallen warriors. He didn't know their customs or their rank markings, but he felt the weight of their sacrifice pressing on him. Whoever she was, they had died for her. That alone told him she was more than a simple passenger. Back in his ship, he laid her on the medbed and connected her to emergency life support. The machines hesitated. Their scanners didn't understand her biology, but they tried. Did what he could, cleaning the burn, sealing the wound, and speaking softly even though she remained unconscious. Hours passed. Storm lights outside flickered across the windows. His body ached, but he refused to leave her side. Then, sometime deep into the night, her fingers twitched. Her eyes opened, bright violet like twin stars hidden beneath water. She looked at him with confusion, pain, and something else he couldn't name. When she tried to rise, he gently pressed her shoulder. "Easy, you're safe." She studied his face, her gaze trembling as though she couldn't believe what she saw. And then, in a soft, musical voice strained by exhaustion, she spoke the first words she ever said to him. "You saved me." Didn't know it then, but that single moment would reshape both their lives, and echo across 5 years of silence yet to come. The woman, no, the alien queen, did not understand where she was at first. Her violet eyes flickered between the medbed lights, the humming machines, and the unfamiliar human man leaning over her with worried brows. Every movement she made seemed careful, as though she expected more pain to follow. Could see fear hiding beneath her calm posture, the kind of fear carried by someone who had lost far too much in a single night. Her breathing steadied, but her voice trembled when she asked, "My people." Hesitated, he didn't know how to answer without hurting her. He had seen the bodies, the broken armor, the silent corridors. He had counted no survivors. Still, he lowered his head gently and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't find anyone else alive." She didn't cry, she didn't make a single sound. She simply closed her eyes and turned her face away as if the room had grown too bright. A quiet sorrow filled the air, heavy enough to stop from taking another step. He wanted to say something, anything, to lighten her grief, but every word he thought of felt small and useless. So instead, he sat beside her in silence, allowing her pain to settle without rushing it. After several long minutes, she opened her eyes again. The sorrow remained, but there was something stronger beneath it. Strength, determination. Her gaze found him again, softer this time. "You risked your life," she said. "For me, you do not know my name, you do not know my world, yet you pulled me from death." Shrugged lightly, trying not to sound heroic. "Anyone would have." "No," she said at once, her voice firm despite her weakness. "Most would flee the nebula, you stayed." She touched the bandages on her side, then looked at him as if searching for something hidden behind his expression. "Why?" Didn't answer immediately. How could he explain the truth? That he knew what it felt like to be alone in the dark, waiting for someone to come? That he had once been stranded after a failed mission, rescued at the last moment by strangers who owed him nothing? Those memories were too raw, too personal to share with someone he had just met. So he simply said, because it was the right thing to do. The Queen studied him with growing curiosity. Her eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, softened further. "My name is," she said finally, "Queen of the last of my guard." She paused, swallowing the pain that threatened to rise again. "I do not know if I am still queen now." Shook his head gently. "A title doesn't disappear just because the universe tries to take it from you." That made something inside her break, but not in a painful way. Her expression softened, and a breath she had been holding slipped out. Gratitude shone in her eyes like soft moonlight. "Then I thank you, Hale, for saving your queen." She tried to sit up, but her body resisted. Quickly supported her, guiding her slowly until she was resting against the raised bed. She was tall enough that her head almost brushed the cabin's upper light. Even injured, she carried a quiet dignity that wrapped around her like a cloak. Outside, the storm still raged. The nebula shook the ship with distant thunder, and bright streaks of cosmic lightning flickered through the small window. The lights dimmed for a second, flinched lightly, so quick that barely noticed. But he saw her hands tighten around the bed's edges. "You're afraid of the dark?" he asked gently. She froze, surprised. "My world was always bright," she whispered. "Even at night our skies glowed with silver rivers. I have never known a sky like yours, black, empty, full of cold." Softened, "Don't worry, you're not alone in it." Something fragile unfolded inside her at those words. She relaxed a little, letting her hands fall open again. For a moment, the two sat quietly while the ship drifted through the dangerous storm. Then the alarms flashed again, this time sharp and angry. A new signal pulsed across the dash, not from the nebula, not from the wreck. Someone else was searching. His eyes widened. "They're coming," she whispered, "not friends." His heart pounded. Whatever hunted her had found her again. And this time, he knew he wouldn't be able to run. His hands tightened on the controls as the alarm blared, a harsh scream in the quiet of the med bay. Sat up, her body tense, muscles coiling like a predator ready to leap. The nebula's storm outside seemed to grow darker, curling in around them like a living thing, but the real threat was the signal on the console. A ship, fast, powerful, and relentless. Someone was hunting her. Looked at her, worry etched deep across his face. "They're not going to wait," he said, voice low but steady. "We have to move now." His violet eyes darted to the window. She could see nothing through the pools clouds, only flashes of cosmic lightning, yet she sensed movement. She had survived countless battles, commanded fleets, and faced death in ways most could never imagine, but this was different. She was unarmed, wounded, and trapped in a human ship she barely understood. Fear, sharp and cold, bit at her chest, but beneath it a spark of defiance remained. She would not die without a fight. Shoved the ship into a sudden maneuver, dodging a burst of plasma that scorched the hull outside. Sparks rained against the cockpit, and the cabin shook violently. Gripped the side of the medbed, nails digging into metal. Her instinct was to leap into battle, but she was weak. The wounds on her side still throbbed, reminding her that she had been saved once by a human she barely knew. And now, if they survived, she would need him again. "They're closing," she said, voice sharp despite the tremor. "They know I'm here. We cannot outrun them forever." His jaw tightened. "Then we fight smart." He flicked controls, activating decoys, redirecting power to the shields, and guiding the small ship through the nebula's writhing storm. The lights flickered as the ship creaked under stress. Every twist and turn felt like the hull itself was screaming under the pressure. Watched him studying his human form with fascination. Even under fear, moved with calm precision, every decision deliberate. His species was fragile compared to hers, yet here he was, risking everything to protect her. And something inside her stirred, a strange warmth, a mix of admiration and gratitude that she had never felt in centuries of rule. She realized then that humans, despite their physical weakness, carried a courage that could rival any warrior she had known. The enemy ship struck again. A flare of light lanced through the nebula as plasma fire collided with the human vessel. Alarms screamed, twisted the controls, narrowly avoiding catastrophe. His heart pounded in sync with the shaking hull. "We can't keep this up," she said. "If they board us," her voice caught. She hated the thought of dying again, of leaving her people without hope, but her fear was tempered by trust. His presence grounded her, reminded her that she was not alone. Then an idea struck her. She said urgently, "The nebula, it's alive, its currents, the storms, we can use it. Lead them into the heart of the storm. They will not follow us there." His eyes widened. He had considered it briefly, but the heart of the nebula was unpredictable, even deadly. One wrong move and they could die, but seeing the determination in her gaze, he nodded. "Then we take the risk. Hold on." Steadied herself as steered the ship into the twisting, glowing core of the nebula. Lightning danced across the dense clouds, plasma arcs cracking the air, and gravity shifted unpredictably. The pursuing ship followed, but the storm was a wall of fire and light that tested their limits. Shields groaned, sensors failed, and the ship rocked violently. Yet's hands never wavered, and his heart, though terrified, felt alive in a way it hadn't in centuries. Hours, or maybe minutes, time blurred, passed in this dance of life and death. And as the last of the storm's light flared, the pursuing ship vanished, swallowed by the nebula's chaotic currents. Silence followed, thick and complete. The only sound was their ragged breathing. Looked at, her eyes glistening with unspoken words. She was alive, they had survived, and for the first time since the disaster, a faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "You saved me again," she whispered. Gave a tired laugh, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah, don't make a habit of it, okay?" But neither of them noticed yet that survival had changed something deeper than life and death. Something unspoken had begun to grow between them, something that would echo far beyond this night of storms. The storm faded, leaving only the silent stretch of stars beyond the cockpit window, and sat in quiet exhaustion, neither speaking, yet each aware of the other's presence in a way that made the silence feel alive. The ship creaked as it drifted, still battered but intact, floating on the edge of the nebula like a fragile lifeboat in an endless dark sea. Finally broke the silence. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I have never trusted anyone so quickly." She turned her violet eyes toward him, searching for a trace of deceit or weakness, and found none. "And yet I do not fear you. How is that possible?" Rubbed the back of his neck, unused to such intense scrutiny. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe you just have to sometimes. When it's a matter of life and death, fear doesn't matter as much as trust or hope." She studied him for a long moment, letting his words sink in. For centuries had ruled with strategy, with wisdom, but never with simplicity. Her people had revered her, feared her, obeyed her, but none had ever reached her in the way this human had. Something in his eyes told her that even if the universe turned against them, he would not abandon her. It was a courage she had rarely seen, a humility she had never known. "Hope," she repeated, letting the word roll over her tongue. Her fingers brushed the bandages along her side, feeling the warmth of her own blood and the faint scars left by violence. She had survived, yet she had almost died. And in that near death, she felt vulnerable, but not weak. There was a strength in her still, and it was mirrored in him. Noticed the faint tension in her shoulders and offered a simple human gesture. "You can rest, really rest. I've got this." For a moment, allowed herself to lean back, closing her eyes. She had spent centuries commanding fleets, issuing orders, deciding who lived and who died. She had never been able to relax fully. Yet now, floating in the darkness with a human who had saved her twice in a single night, she felt the heavy weight of responsibility lift just a little. Minutes stretched into hours. The stars outside moved imperceptibly, and the nebula's glow had faded into a gentle luminescence. Monitored the ship's systems, but his thoughts drifted. He had risked everything for this queen he barely knew. And still, he felt compelled to do more: protect, guide, and perhaps understand. Something deep inside him whispered that this was bigger than duty or chance. This was about connection, about what it meant to be human in a universe that often forgot humanity. Stirred, opening her eyes again, she looked at him, and for the first time she spoke words meant only for herself, but loud enough for him to hear. "I have never met someone like you, Hale. You see me, not as a queen, not as a symbol, but as someone alive." Glanced up, startled by the raw honesty in her tone. He could see her vulnerability, the loneliness that stretched behind her violet gaze like a shadow that had followed her for centuries. "I see you," he said simply. "That's all." A quiet warmth passed between them, more powerful than the storm they had survived. Neither needed to speak further. In the darkness, a fragile trust had taken root, delicate yet unbreakable. But the quiet could not last forever. Scom panel crackled faintly, a new signal appearing on the screen. It was faint but deliberate, a trace of a ship moving through the outer rim of the nebula. She tensed instantly. "They are still looking," she said. "The ones who attacked me, they will not stop." Sighs narrowed. "Then we need a plan, one they can't anticipate, one that buys us time." Nodded, rising slowly despite the pain that lingered in her side. The physical wounds were temporary, but the enemies they had made and the secrets of her past would not rest. And as she looked at, she realized that no matter the danger ahead, she had found an ally unlike any other. A human who could walk beside a queen through darkness and storms and still stand tall. For the first time in centuries, allowed herself a thought that had been foreign to her for so long. Perhaps survival was not enough. Perhaps with this human beside her, she could find something more: trust, courage, and maybe even hope. And in that moment, the quiet between them held a promise neither had spoken aloud, but both understood. The nebula's glow faded completely as piloted the damaged ship into open space. Stars stretched like cold diamonds across the black void, and the silence outside was heavier than any storm. Yet the enemy trace remained on their sensors, faint but unyielding, a ghost that would not relent. Stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on the console, her eyes fixed on the distant point of pursuit. She had survived countless battles, but this hunt felt different. It was personal. "They're relentless," she said, her voice calm but edged with urgency. "Whatever they are, they will not give up until I am either dead or captured. And if that happens—" Her words trailed into the darkness, the weight of unspoken doom pressing down. Glanced at her, noticing the way her jaw tightened and the subtle rise of tension in her shoulders. "Then we won't let that happen," he said, tone firm. "I won't let them take you." His violet eyes softened, catching the sincerity in his gaze. Humans were fragile, yes, but there was something fierce in his simplicity. A determination that did not come from titles or armies, but from choice. His choice to protect, to fight, to stand. She realized then that her survival might depend not on her own power, but on this human who had chosen her life over his own. Adjusted the ship's trajectory, skimming past a cluster of asteroid fields. Each maneuver tested the vessel's limits. Sparks flew along the hull as it scraped dangerously close to jagged rocks, winced and placed a hand over the console. "You risk too much," she said, her voice tinged with fear. "You could be." "Alive enough to save you again?" he interrupted with a grim smile. "Trust me." For a moment she allowed herself a small, fleeting laugh. It was the first in hours, a sound that felt fragile yet human, echoing softly in the cockpit. That sound, she realized, was the kind of warmth she had been missing for centuries. Not power, not armies, not obedience, just the presence of someone who cared. Then the sensors flared violently. The enemy ship had accelerated, cutting closer, slicing through the void with lethal precision. Plasma bolts streaked toward them, and the human ship shuddered under the impact. Cursed, twisting controls and activating emergency shields. The cabin rocked violently and stumbled, clutching the console for balance. "We need to hide," she said, her voice tight with urgency. There's a field of gravity distortions nearby. We can use it." Nodded without hesitation, trusting her instincts. He guided the ship toward the distortions, dodging floating debris and weaving between sudden gravitational waves that threatened to crush them. The enemy fired again, but the chaotic pull of the field caused their shots to miss. Sharp eyes followed every movement, calculating, predicting, guiding him with instinct born of leadership and experience. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed in this deadly ballet. Their hearts pounded in unison, the silence between them punctuated only by the ship's alarms and the occasional flicker of lightning from distant stars. And then, for a brief moment, they were alone. The enemy was gone, temporarily disoriented by the field's chaotic currents. Exhaled slowly, her tension melting slightly. She turned to, her gaze more vulnerable than it had ever been. "You've kept me alive twice tonight. I owe you more than words can say." Shook his head, trying to hide the faint redness creeping into his cheeks. "You don't owe me anything," he said softly. "I'm just glad you're still here." For the first time, the quiet between them was filled not with fear or tension, but something unspoken, fragile, and powerful. A connection forged through danger and trust, stronger than titles, stronger than armies, stronger than fear itself. But deep in the shadows beyond the stars, the enemy would not rest. The hunt was far from over, and as the two drifted through the darkness, realized that survival alone would no longer be enough. She had begun to hope, not just for life, but for something more, something she had long thought impossible, a reason to trust again. And for the first time in centuries, she felt that maybe, just maybe, that reason was human. The stars stretched endlessly before them, cold and silent, yet the danger had not left. Piloted the small ship with careful precision, his fingers gripping the controls as sweat traced lines down his temples. Sat beside him, leaning lightly on the console, her violet eyes scanning every flicker of the sensors. The enemy was clever, relentless, and closing again. But now something deeper weighed on both of them, not just survival, but the fragile bond that had grown over these long hours. "I need to tell you something," said quietly. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of urgency. "When I am fully recovered, I will have to return to my world. My people, what remains of them, need leadership even if I am the last." Swallowed, he had known this day would come, yet hearing it out loud made his chest tighten. "I understand," he said slowly, "but that doesn't mean we have to part now, not tonight." She turned to him, her gaze soft but filled with centuries of experience and pain. "You have no idea what it means to be a queen, to hold the lives of billions in your hands. If I fail, even once, they die. I cannot abandon them." He nodded, trying to hide the turmoil in his heart. "Then let me help you. Not as a soldier, not as a stranger, but as someone who chooses to stay, even if it's just for tonight." For a moment, silence filled the cockpit. Outside, stars glimmered like scattered diamonds, indifferent to the fate of two souls huddled in a fragile ship. Fingers brushed the console near his, almost touching his hand. That small, fleeting contact carried more weight than armies, fleets, or weapons. It was trust, vulnerability, and something unspoken, something both of them felt but neither dared name. Then the enemy appeared. A ship, black and angular, slid into view like a shadow consuming the light. Sensors screamed warnings as plasma fire tore toward them. Twisted controls, evading bolts that threatened to punch holes in the hull. His eyes flared with determination, and though her wounds still ached, she began to help, issuing rapid commands in a language only she knew, guiding him through maneuvers that logic and gravity. Together they became a single force, human ingenuity and alien instinct, intertwined in a desperate dance of life and death. The enemy fired again, but the combined skill of pilot and queen turned the ambush into chaos. Plasma bolts ricocheted into the void, the enemy faltered, and for the first time in hours dared to hope. When the last of the pursuing ship disappeared into the void, silence returned, thick, heavy, yet comforting. Sank onto the console, exhaustion etched into every line of her body. "You saved me again," she whispered, her voice raw with gratitude and something else, something softer. Reached out, his hand hovering near hers. "You've saved me too," he said quietly. "Not from fire or plasma, but from being alone. You reminded me that we can choose to care even when the universe is against us." Her eyes glistened, violet lights reflecting the distant stars. For centuries, she had ruled alone, trusted few, and relied on herself. Yet now here was a human, so fragile, so mortal, yet fearless in ways she had never known, sitting beside her, holding a hand she did not yet dare to grasp. Minutes passed in silence, their hearts speaking louder than words. But the truth lingered. When the journey ended, they would face a choice neither wanted to make. Could not follow her to her war-torn world, and she could not stay forever in a place that was not hers. The bond they had forged was real, yet fragile. Finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. One day we may meet again, but for now we survive, that is enough. Nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He wanted to say more, to promise her eternity, to defy the universe itself, but he could not. Not yet. And as the ship drifted through the quiet emptiness of space, two souls, human and alien, held onto a fragile hope, a bond born of danger, trust, and courage. A hope that one day the choices of two worlds might allow them to be together. But for tonight, survival was all that mattered. 5 years had passed since that night in the nebula, since Hale had risked everything to save the last queen of the... She had returned to her shattered world, rebuilding what remained of her people, guiding them through storms of politics, war, and betrayal. And yet, despite the victories, a shadow lingered in her heart, the memory of a human who had stayed when no one else could, who had held her life as sacred. Now she was no longer just a queen. She was a survivor, a leader who carried the weight of a dying civilization on her shoulders. And she had finally tracked him down. Lived quietly on the outskirts of a human colony, a small settlement near a quiet star system. He had returned to routine flights, and routine life, yet the memory of never left him. Some nights he would look at the stars and feel her presence in the void, a quiet insistence that he was not alone in the universe. He thought of her often, wondered if she had survived, wondered if she remembered him. Then one morning, a flash of violet light streaked across the horizon. His sensors went haywire as a sleek, golden ship appeared in orbit, unlike any human craft he had ever seen. And then he saw her, herself, stepping onto the landing platform, regal as ever, yet the violet glow of her eyes softened with recognition and something deeper, longing. He froze, unsure if he should run or greet her. 5 years had changed both of them. He had grown older, wiser in the ways of humans, but she had changed too, carrying centuries of experience, loss, and strength that made her almost untouchable. And yet in her gaze, he saw the same gratitude, the same fragile trust, the same bond that had begun in that storm so many years ago. "Hale," she said, her voice soft but unwavering, carrying across the empty landing field. "You left without a word. I wondered if I would ever see you again." Stepped forward, heart pounding. He began, but words failed him. How could he explain the silence, the fear of losing her again, the years of quiet longing that had never left him? His gaze softened, and for the first time a faint smile touched her lips. "You saved my life. You risked everything for me, and I've spent these years building a world knowing I might never repay you. But now I've found you." He swallowed, emotions crashing over him. "I thought you might hate me for disappearing." She shook her head, stepping closer, the glow of her aura softening the cold metal around them. "How could I hate someone who saved me? How could I forget someone who held my life in their hands when all hope seemed lost?" His chest tightened. "I never stopped thinking about you, not for a single day." For a moment the universe seemed to pause. Two beings, one human, one alien, stood beneath a quiet star, carrying the weight of years, danger, and hope. And in that pause, something fragile and eternal bloomed. Reached out, her hand brushing against his. The warmth was real, human, yet carried the strength of someone who had survived centuries of war and death. 5 years, she whispered, and yet it feels like no time at all. Smiled, finally letting go of the fear and doubt that had shadowed him for so long. "Then let's not waste another moment." She laughed softly, a sound like wind over distant seas. "Together, then." "Together," he confirmed, his hand finally covering hers, grounding her and himself in the certainty of this moment. The stars above seemed to shine brighter that day, and the quiet of the colony was no longer empty. 5 years of distance, fear, and uncertainty had ended, not with battles or strategy or survival, but with a choice. A choice to trust, to hope, and to be together. Looked at him, her violet eyes glimmering with unshed tears, and finally spoke the words that had lived in her heart for half a decade. "You saved me once. Stay with me, and you'll save me forever." Smiled, squeezing her hand. "I will forever." And in that moment, across the vast emptiness of the galaxy, a human and a queen stood side by side, proof that courage, compassion, and trust could bridge worlds, heal wounds, and forge a love stronger than the stars themselves. The universe was vast and dangerous, but together they were unstoppable.